This is true. Very few people have the tool set required to properly interpret the Bible. If by properly, we just mean in sophisticated ways, that is to say, to be able to interpret the Bible with a full knowledge of linguistic, literary, historical, ideological, social contexts, etc., to be able to interpret the Bible with some knowledge of the history of biblical interpretation and the various religions that have contributed to it, to be able to interpret the Bible with just a full knowledge of the biblical text or something approaching a full knowledge of the biblical text in mind as we go about doing it. You're right, very few people have that tool set. And that's because that tool set takes an enormous amount of time and energy and often expense in order to be able to acquire. And people simply don't have access to those resources or aren't willing to spend them in order to acquire this particular tool set. And I can't blame them for doing that. It's not a comfortable process, and your career prospects afterwards aren't super great. Having said that, I think there are two important caveats that are worth thinking about a little bit more. The first is that on my own, I probably wouldn't use the term properly to describe this. I don't think proper is really the right word to think about this. I think proper has too much of a value judgment attached to it. And so I would prefer sophisticated. Most people lack the tool set required to interpret the Bible in sophisticated ways. I do think that there are very simple, proper ways to interpret the Bible that don't require much of a tool set at all. If a person just opens up the book of Psalms, for example, for just an intimate devotional reading of the text where their only goal is to draw closer to God through the text poetry, I don't think that's improper. I think that's a proper way to read the Bible. And that doesn't require a tool set at all beyond sort of an earnest desire to do that. Secondly, the fact that very few people have the tool set necessary to interpret the Bible in sophisticated ways is really only a problem if we conceive of the project of biblical interpretation as an individual task, as something that person or that person or that person quite separately engage in. Then, yeah, it's a big problem. We're kind of screwed in that situation. But we don't need to conceive of the project of biblical interpretation as an individual project. I think it should be conceived of as a communal project, something that communities engage in collectively. And as soon as we do that, we sort of democratize or spread out the difficulty of interpreting the Bible. And if communities are willing to bring in the voices of biblical scholars who do have the tool set necessary to interpret the Bible in sophisticated ways, then they gain access to that tool set through their voices. The more people you have in your community who are reading and sharing the voices of those who do have this tool set, the more your community has access to this tool set. So yeah, random individual layperson on the street or in a pew, they have very little chance of being able to interpret the Bible in sophisticated ways. But we, collectively together, as a community, even as an online community, if we share our knowledge, we can interpret the Bible in sophisticated ways.